Welcome back to another XS Sites install video. I'm John, and today we'll be installing R3D 2.0s on a HK VP9 optics ready. We have the factory sights on here that are standard height, and we want to be installing some suppressor heights so that we can use this gun with a red dot. What we'll need for this install: hammer, assorted set of punches. This is a nylon punch, not a glue stick. And then a little bit of cleaning. So in your package, it'll arrive looking like this. You have essentially your front sight. We ordered green. Your rear sight, it's the R3D 2.0, serrated rear, PVC, and your high intensity tritium. And we've got everyone's least favorite thing to use, some thread locker. That helps hold everything in the gun. So step number one is you want to make sure your gun is unloaded. So we've got a fully unloaded firearm. Step two, disassembly. Refer to your gun's owner's manual or secondary disassembly instructions. Luckily, HK is pretty simple. One flip of a lever, we've got the gun apart. Remove our recoil spring and our barrel. And this will be primary focus for today. So for uninstall, I've opted to use the nylon punch. It's the weakest punch we have. So if this gets the job done, I'll tell you how easy it is. Gonna make sure your gun's snug. Always check for lead-in angles. A lot of times there's an installation direction from the factory. So they'll install the sights a certain direction. You want to try and uninstall them the same direction that they installed them from. For this one, it looks pretty symmetrical, so I can do uninstall either direction. So I'm opting for a better camera shot. If you'll notice, I'm pushing not on the sight body itself, but on the blade. A lot of times what ends up happening is it'll tear up your nylon punch, especially when they get stuck towards the middle. But all of my hits were on the sight blade. So here we'll be retaining our rack assist. These plastic pieces are the rack assist designed by HK. They help people grab the slide to rack and reload. I do not believe there's an installation direction with these either, but it's easier for me to uninstall this direction. For the sake of the video, I will attempt to give you guys a good view. Now, one thing to note when you're uninstalling these, you want to start with soft pressure and work your way into it. Once you find the proper pressure, how hard you have to swing the hammer, it's about that the whole way out. So you don't have to overswing. But every now and then you come across one, you got to get the big hammer out. Your next step, you want to use some sort of cleaner. We use this brand gun scrubber. Cleaner is cleaner. Just get a little down on the dovetail, make sure there's no excess debris. Oil. I know everyone at home loves to clean their guns, so there's oil and everything. You just want to try and get your dovetail as clean as possible. See the dirt? Now I have here a little soft bristle brush. I do not recommend using a metal brush. And that's just to get down and try and get every last ounce of dirt you can. And clean it to your own satisfaction. Some people are more neat freaks than others. One thing people can run into with these HKs, it's not very common, but we have seen it, is overvicing. The HK slide is not perfectly square, so as you vice it, it'll try and rotate on you while you're installing your sights. You're going to make sure you use something soft. Here we have rubber jaws. There's also brass jaws, or, you know, just wrap it carefully and make sure you don't damage your slide when you're vicing. If you feel you need to hold your gun tighter, what you may have to do is shim the top part of the slide slightly in your vise. And here the rubber acts as that, is that the bottom is compressed more than the top. It holds it up and down the entire slide. We have our lead-in angles. I'll give you my best to show you this. You'll see there's slight taper on this side of the dovetail, and I'll show you the other side, and it's squared off. You want to install this with the lead-in angles first. So that's lead-in angles, and it should get a good bit into the dovetail before it gets tight. And then we want to align our punch low on the dovetail blade, not the sight body. Dovetail blade, not sight body. And start with a soft pressure. Slowly work up our pressure. As you can see, my slide is rising up instead of my sight going in. So I may have to shim mine even in these soft jaws. I'm going to reposition, and I'll show you shimming. I'm just folding this up to where I have a thicker part at the top than the bottom. I'm going to grab the whole thing in the vise. Easier said than done. They haven't figured out how to give people 3 hands yet, so. And this is where you question if you need upgraded punch. So one thing you'll notice with the nylon, the harder you hit it, the more you damage the end of the punch. And this is where upgrading, I'm using a brass here, but I also have steel. Go next to the brass. It's tearing up the nylon too much, so we gotta go one material up. So the brass will deform before you damage your gun, but you still want to be careful. And then you can leave brass marks behind on anything you hit, and you just have to clean that up with some bluing solution. Ooh, I hit my vise. And so you notice I'm about to flip the gun around. I'm going to shim it the way that you're driving the opposite side from where you're driving the sight in. So now the camera angle may get a little funky, but I assure you I'm doing the exact same thing. I just flipped everything around for better leverage. Smash your fingers. So if you look here, we have a little bit of brass mark. That'll be all right. It'll clean right up. That's why we use brass over steel. When you have to get into the steel punch, that's when you start questioning whether or not you should do this install at home. Another thing I'm doing that's hard to see is I'm tapping the brass one side of the dovetail and then the opposite. So I'm walking back and forth along the dovetail instead of driving all on one side. And if you look here, we are almost all the way in. Just a few more hits should get us. not quite centered. Hard to see in the light, but we are just about centered. I have a little pocket flashlight just to double check. We have about the same gap on each side of the middle rib of the gun. If we look at the rear sight, we also have a lead-in angle on this one. So we want our install to be done essentially from the same side. As you'll see, you can even start it by hand and give it a good push. That's as far as I can get it for a third of the way in the gun. I'm gonna go back to my nylon punch. See if I can get this in. Oh yeah. Sometimes to get it in the middle of the gun, especially on the rear sight, you have to take it out, and what you're looking for is either even gap on each side, which I need to drive it in a little farther, or you're trying to line up your sight window with your middle. One more tap. The gun's rotating a little bit. Squeeze it a little bit harder. There we go. And as you do these installs, you learn how much hammer pressure you need, how hard you need to swing. But you'll see we've got a good bit of brass marks. Those will clean up with some bluing solution. And I can promise everyone here that this is the same slide. You can see how bad it was before, and just with a little bit of bluing solution, you could even do a second pass if you want it to look nicer than this, but it gets cleaned up nice. So don't be afraid to use a brass punch, just be careful. We've got our sights installed. One thing we need to be careful with before we apply Loctite is our wings. So you'll see I'll do a little bit different Loctite method with this gun than I will with most. What we'll do is we'll start with the front. We'll take our supplied Loctite. Oh, never used. Give it a twist to break the tip. Now we want to carefully apply some all around the dovetail. So, fun fact about Loctite is it requires air to activate. That's why this tube stays liquid for virtually ever. So anything that doesn't come in contact with air will not dry. Another fun thing about Loctite is it has very good, what they call capillary action. Oh, I'll turn this so you guys can see. Very good capillary action to where it will seep down into all these nooks and crannies. And anywhere there's a tiny gap, it will get in there. It will harden and it will chemically lock the sight in place. This stuff has pretty good temperature resistance and very good mechanical strength. So it will hold your sight in place. So a lot of people misunderstand Loctite and they think that it's like a welding process. All it is just a gap filler that holds itself to the two walls, and it does have a breakaway strength, and the breakaway strength is a lot less than people think. If you going back, if you have Loctite on it and this punch doesn't work, taking your sight off, you will be able to do it with, what we call an upgraded materials punch. So you will be able to get your sights off if you Loctite it. A lot of people give Loctite a bad name because they put it on threads, and then the strength required to break it loose from the threads is more than the allowable force that the tool will apply. So you'll strip your bolt head or your tool will strip, especially with smaller fasteners. Also too, with threads is you have a lot more surface area. So surface area is a big factor with Loctite. So moving on to the rear, we want to be careful not to get Loctite inside of our racking assist. So we just run a good bead all across the back of the sight. Now this will leak down and get into the dovetail. I'm going to do a tiny drop in this corner. I want to avoid this corner. I grab this corner with the lead in, and I want to run it across the face of the sight, trying not to get too close to the sides. But here you can see like that little dab that I put for this lead-in corner, it's already started to walk its way towards our racking handles. So you want to be very careful not to add too much. Less is more when it comes to this. As you can see, maybe the camera can pick it up, maybe it can't. But it is moving its way around, so all you need to do is just give it a little time. It'll do its work. The tacky activation point for Loctite is about 15 minutes, so we'll wait 5 minutes and then we'll do a little bit of cleanup. Paper towel in this case, that way I can dispose of it later. And you want to just get a lot of the excess off. I mean, we're literally just wiping it down because we're about to give it a good wipe and clean. If you wait too long, it'll start to harden up on you and you'll have a hard time getting your gun to look clean afterwards. So I'm just showing you there's no fancy tools involved. It's just elbow grease and a paper towel. Get in there, wipe your Loctite. There'll be some tight corners that we do have. I'm going to use the regular side of the Q-tip, nothing fancy. Most Q-tips you buy will be rounded. So I'll use the rounded side for you, just to get in and clean up two little spots that are hard to get. That's going to be right down in here in the dovetail. You don't actually need to clean these if you're not worried about it, but you will see just a tiny bit of hardened Loctite if you don't clean these. And just rub it back and forth. And if you got the fancy Q-tips, you can get as clean as your heart desires. One thing you don't want to do is spray cleaner on this before it's given 15 to 30 minutes air cure. If you look here, we'll have a little bit down in this dovetail. I've got a sharp-nosed Q-tip, so I'm getting down and just cleaning it. Marketing likes their guns to look clean, so they're going to ask me to clean it anyway. For the rear, it's essentially a repeat. Dab it, take it off thick. When I say less is more, less is more. The more you take off of this, the better it will cure onto the gun. You have no worries about that. Also too, if you go to the range and you find that your gun shoots left or right a little bit, you can knock the sight over slightly, and then just add a little more Loctite and it'll seep down in between. So you imagine the Loctite is like this, and then when you move the sight, it's like this. When you add more, it'll get down into the cracks and then lock it back in place. Oop, my glove was stuck, so I can't do the rotate. Now I've got and then your very last step of install, to take your preferred gun cleaner, spritz a little, and then touch up anywhere you think extra Loctite is that you don't want to see. How clean you want your gun is up to how much work you're willing to put in. And of course, reassembly. Always keep your finger off the trigger. Make sure your gun is unloaded. And do allow up to 24 hours for full cure on the Loctite before you shoot it. Thank you for tuning in for our site install for suppressor heights on an HK VP9 Optics Ready. Remember, this is the Optics Ready version. For more information on new products, make sure you check out our newsletter. It can be found on the back side of your packaging here.